Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining InsideView's webinar series. Today, we're thrilled to host social selling expert Barb Giamanco. I'm going to start by introducing Barb and doing a few warm-ups, but I would like to encourage everyone to ask questions in the chat window as we go along. We will be able to handle some things while we're in flight, and we will make sure to respond to every single question either at the Q&A or immediately following via email. We'll also be doing a comprehensive blog post after this event, plus the recording. So there's lots of different ways to digest the information. If we can go to the slide with Barb's overview, I'm not going to read this to everyone. Suffice it to say, Barb is a fantastic expert and has been following social media and implementing social selling strategies for more than 10 years. So suffice it to say, she's probably one of the early inventors of the tactics to interact with your prospects and customers in this way. We're thrilled to have her. She's authored several books and articles, and she's got a terrific blog and podcast series on the Razor's Edge, which I was happy enough to be included in. So as we get started this morning, we want to know who we have on the line with us. We're thrilled that we had more than 2,000 registrants for this particular webinar, and we've got a bunch of you on the line today. We have two quick polls, and this first one here is we want to know if your company has a social selling program or policy of any kind today. So we'll give you about 20 seconds to answer that. As I'm looking at the answers coming in, it looks like the material is pretty evenly distributed. Let's give it another 5 seconds and then we'll close the poll. Let's go ahead and close it and see the results. Very interesting. We have super distribution, really almost a third each way through. So that should be very interesting for everyone that's on this line. So then the very next poll relates to how sophisticated your company is in using social selling. And this, answer this personally as well, because whether your company has one or not, you yourself may be interacting on your own. And we'll give the poll another, maybe 10 seconds, but it looks like the majority of the people are just getting started. Which is awesome because Barb is really going to do a nice intro overview and then point people in the direction of additional things to do to get more sophisticated. So there we are, 63% just getting started. All right, well, without further ado, I would like to officially hand this over to Barb. Please take it away, and here's your audience.
All right, Tracy, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the series. I really appreciate it. And looking forward to our conversation today about how to implement a social selling strategy. And one of the reasons why I'm super excited about that is I think that many people now are starting to really understand how important it is to start to integrate social media into their selling process. And it's not always easy to figure out how to do that, both on an individual and from a sales leader point of view. It's not always easy to figure out how you do it in order to roll that out to your entire sales force. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be with your audience today. So I'm going to talk about a few things today. First, briefly, why social selling for any person who's still on the fence. I just want to give you some things to think about in terms of why this is so important to you today. And then we're going to spend the bulk of the time talking about the elements of the strategic plan and why it's so important for sales and marketing to be aligned and teamed up. We'll talk about tools and training and then measurement and incentives. So really the whole purpose today is to give you some things to think about in terms of creating that overall strategy for rolling out a social selling program that can be adopted inside the organization. So let's first talk about the why. If you've been in sales more than 5 years, certainly if you've been in sales more than 10 years, and I'm not going to even tell you how long I've been in sales, but it's been a long time, and I can tell you that sales has definitely been disrupted. Because these new technologies and digital ways of interacting with people, the whole sales process is being shaken up, and that's largely driven by buyers. Buyers have a whole different expectation of what they want from us. And so 90% of the decision makers are saying they don't respond to cold outreach. And that means cold emails and cold calls. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean that email marketing isn't working. One of the things that I'll talk about is it does work given the message and how that's targeted and tailored. But if you're a sales professional using a strategy of just sending cold emails to people you don't know yet or making cold calls, the potential for driving sales opportunities is far less successful than it ever used to be. Another thing to be thinking about is that 82% of prospects can be reached via social networks. Now, certainly there are going to be certain industries where that's a little bit tougher, but in general, whether it's a business-to-business environment or a business-to-consumer environment, potential buyers can be reached via social networks, and they are using those social channels, by the way, to do their homework and research on us before that buying journey actually gets started. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have a role in the early part of the buying journey when buyers are actually, doing their early stage research. In fact, we have a super opportunity to get ahead of sales opportunities for that very reason. But it does really start with the recognition that this process is going on, often without our knowledge. And so we have to be prepared for what that means for us. So for anyone in sales today, in order to really accelerate the process for yourself, I'm going to suggest to you that one of the most important things you can do is think about changing your sales behavior. Think about changing up some of the activities that might have worked very successfully back in the day, but today aren't working as well. I also want to go on record as saying that while I'm a huge proponent of incorporating the use of social channels into your sales mix, I don't believe that all you do is sit at your desk all day on Twitter, right? So it's really a merging of those online tactics and strategies, but merging that with traditional selling methods that are really helping you to expand those networks, develop those relationships, generate leads, conduct your research, which ultimately our goal is to drive the revenue. For myself personally, I do lots of different things in order to continue to expand my networks and get myself an opportunity to be part of that early stage education. Even by teaming up with organizations like InsideView, I've been a longtime fan and user of the product, but doing webinars like this today. Think about offline. How often are you reaching out and looking for opportunities to maybe speak at an event or be part of a panel? There are lots of great ways for you to be able to get in front of your potential buyers, both offline and online. So I hope you will think about that. So the biggest reason that you want to think about how you integrate social into what you're doing as far as a sales point of view goes, it's because it helps you to reach quota. Right? So in 2014, 74% of salespeople who were exceeding quota, they described themselves as highly effective. They are socially savvy, and because of that, they tend to exceed quota almost 7 times more than those salespeople who are either not using social media, which surprisingly, there are a lot of those people out there, or they have very basic rudimentary skills. And so it's really important for you to figure out what you need to do, and we're going to be talking about that today, in order to get yourself skilled, because this is the way of the world, and it's not going to go backwards. So the sooner you get in and get those skills ramped up, the better positioned you're going to be as technologies continue to change and advance. And so finally, in 2012, when a colleague of mine and I did an international survey to find out if sales reps using social media were actually closing deals, they absolutely were. 54% of them were closing deals, and in a recent update on that survey, that number has now increased another 10% in 2014. So without question, and as you can see from the charts, without question, those sellers who are using social media as part of the mix, they're closing business. So there's no more reason really for you to be sitting on the fence.
Barb, this is Tracy. We have a lot of inbound questions related to sophistication. As you saw in the poll, 63% of the folks are just getting started. And there's several questions around, if you could say more about kind of the range of sophistication that you see with salespeople today.
That's a great question, and I'm glad you brought it up, Tracy. And I wasn't actually all that surprised with the poll results, to tell you the truth. But part of me it is, because I'm an early adopter, and so I did start to get involved with the early social media tools 10 plus years ago, and was involved in LinkedIn in the very first year that it came out. I would say that the level of sophistication is about right on par where our audience is today. I think part of that is because there's still sometimes confusion about how social media really applies to business. That's one aspect. Two, I think sometimes people mistakenly think that the use of social media in business today only applies to what marketing is doing. And then finally, I think that you have some very successful people out there, many thousands of successful sellers who feel that their approach is really working, so why change it? But what I would say is that this is the way of the world, and just like we had to start shifting up our approaches when old-fashioned technology like the fax machine came into the mix, and then we got email, and believe it or not, there really was a time before we did business without mobile phones, and so all of those things caused us to shift our approach. The same is true today. So what I want people to really come away from this with, Tracy, is just realizing it's okay if you're not quite there yet, but it's not okay to not get going.
Barb, can you say a tiny bit more about the relevance in business to business? We've had quite a few questions from folks saying, I get this if I was a B2C company and I was interacting with a bunch of consumer buyers, but I'm not quite sure about approaching other businesses.
Great question. So first and foremost, what I want you to think about is platforms like LinkedIn is about the biggest business-to-business networking platform in the world. And so you can find every major corporation and executives and other decision makers and other individuals inside corporate organizations all over the world participating on that particular platform. It's also a mistake for people to think that business-to-business buyers are not doing early-stage research. They absolutely are. And as a matter of fact, most of the time they can get a ton of information from your own corporate website. So this is it's an important question, Tracy, because people often think, yeah, no, business-to-business buyers, especially if it's a complex sale, no, they're not doing homework. Yes, they are, my friends. They are doing homework on us, and we need to be doing homework on them.
Very good. Thank you, Barb.
You're welcome. So let's go ahead and go forward. So here's where it all starts, my friends. And this, I would say, is one of the biggest places where an organization or an individual may make a misstep. This is more than jumping onto platforms or using technology tools, just clicking on buttons. You really do have to have a strategic approach. You want to be asking yourself, and this, by the way, is going to hold true whether you are planning a workforce rollout and you want all your sellers to be following a social selling process. You've got to start with a strategy and start asking yourself some pretty key questions. And those questions really are going to help you then define who you're targeting and why, and what your message is going to look like, and where you're going to approach them, and even what the process is going to be when certain things are happening between sales and marketing. Some of the keys to that success, it's just like any other initiative you might roll out in your organization. You start with the strategy that is also supported with executive sponsors from the sales and marketing organizations. And when I say sales, I also want to say that this incorporates people in sales operations or sales enablement. So it's really important that everybody kind of comes together in terms of this program. Sales and marketing got to be connected at the hip. I've always believed that, and that is never more true now in terms of the integration of social media into the business processes, because there are certain parts of the process that marketing owns responsibility for and has a role to play there, certainly when it comes to the content strategy. And then, of course, sales needs to be there too. So kind of going back to the question about, gosh, I'm in B2B sales, why do I need to be using social? Well, number one, customers are blocking us the old-fashioned way with emails and phone calls. You need another door in, and you can use these technologies to help you do research on the people and look for common connections and secure introductions. And so there's just a ton of reasons for you to be there. Also, the key to the program being successful is all about giving your sellers, making sure they have the right access to tools and the training. You know, it's not easy to just figure this out on your own. There is an art to learning how to navigate in this new environment. It's an art to figure out how you're going to connect with people and what are you going to say. I mean, I'm old school, but first impressions really matter. And so how you approach somebody for the first time online is going to be super important. And then another key is, of course, the measuring and the tracking. So you want to have scorecards. You want to have incentives. You want to give sellers a reason to really get behind this. But the biggest reason that I could, give a salesperson is that it generates a return, right? It generates a positive ability to drive that quota forward. And that's what we're in business to do, right? We're in business to achieve our quota objectives. So part of this process is really about helping to break down those silos. Because sales enablement and marketing all work together. You know, you need that leadership commitment on the part of all the groups. Certainly from a sales point of view, you want to make sure that leaders are involved here as well. They've got to be committed to it. They've got to be modeling the way, which means they need to be involved in social. And then, of course, it's important for them to hold their folks accountable. Next, you're going to have that adoption plan that is carried forward inside the organization, which includes an ongoing commitment to learning, which I'm definitely going to talk about. Nothing pains me more than to see, and I've seen this now for years in terms of working with organizations to develop learning and development programs. Training is not a one-time event, and so I'm going to talk more about that. And finally, marketing is all about driving the community, creating content, and really helping to convert conversations and content into sales conversations. So these three groups just have to work together. It's just critically important to the success in the organization.
Barb, I'm going to pause you here. This is Tracy. We've got a bunch of questions that I think are really related to content and approach, and I'll just read one to you that's representative of several that have come in. The person says, I battle with tone. I don't want to blatantly push my products, so what do I do?
That is a great question, and it comes up a lot, and I'm really glad that it came up today because it's super important that when you think about your mix of sharing content, you know, I'm all about 80% other people's content, 20% my own. And so I think that's a pretty good mix for organizations as well, but you can sort of do some testing to see what's really working for you. But what I will say, Tracy, is that when the content is always focused on your company, your product, your service, you, that turns buyers off. They're not going to pay attention to that. So a good mix of educational and relevant content from reputable sources that help you demonstrate to potential buyers that you are a thought leader, that you are somebody who's very credible and capable in your industry, and you're bringing educational content to them that's of value. That should be the majority of the mix. And then you mix in, let me tell you about the webinar or a new product, or here's our new blog. Where I see people getting into a lot of trouble is when it's all me, let me tell you about all our stuff.
So Barb, it's an interesting fact that, you know, here we are at InsideView doing exactly what you're saying, right? We're engaging with our audience with interesting content that really has nothing to do with our products directly, but we've brought you in as an expert, to share best practices. So, I would encourage folks to do the same. And I think it's a little bit altruism, right? That's driving the behavior. It's you want to help your prospects and educate them and engage with them on things that they're curious about. And then you find ways when the time is right to talk about your own offering.
That's absolutely right. Well, also, and let's not forget, Tracy, that so I'm a go-giver gal. I love Bob Berg's book, A Go-Giver, but I've always believed in helping people first. And when you do that, they naturally are going to want to learn more about you. And gosh, we didn't really set this up, but if I were just to take a brief poll and have people chime in with comments, I bet I know the answer to the question I'm about to ask, which is, well, what do you think, audience? If you jump on a webinar and somebody's just there doing a whole big product pitch, are you interested or excited about that? Or are you more interested in a program like what we want to do for you today, where we're trying to give you some helpful strategies and ideas, things that you could actually take back and start to implement in your own business? See, my belief, Tracy, is that people appreciate that educational value approach, and what goes around does come around. They'll come back to want to learn more about you, and so I think it's really important to think about it in that particular way.
One last comment that just came in, Barb, that I think is really interesting is this person said, I found that using social media to find out what a company is going through helps uncover pain even before reaching out to help decision makers.
Well, amen. Whoever said that, you are so right on. And that's why I am so keen and always am, going on my, rant with people about how important it is to do some homework, do a little bit of digging, educate yourself before you reach out to somebody, because your message needs to be relevant and compelling. And I happen to be a longtime fangirl of, the InsideView tool. Right, so I use InsideView religiously for business intelligence and for doing exactly that. So I couldn't agree more. Do your homework. Learn a little bit about somebody. That isn't always my first approach, to try and just do warm outreach, right, if I don't know somebody. But absolutely, when I'm trying to get in front of somebody, I think about what's important to them, not what I'm interested in selling.
Thank you.
You're absolutely welcome. And thanks to the audience for being so engaged. I love it. Keep the questions and the ideas and the thoughts coming in, which is great. All right, so as you're thinking about the strategy and the plan, again, even if you're doing this for yourself as an individual salesperson, it's all the same. You've got to think first about your target audience. And dare I say, not everybody with a pulse is a prospect for you. I can't believe that sometimes I've asked that question in an audience who's your core target buyer, and people will say, gosh, anybody can buy. The problem with that philosophy is that technically anybody could buy, but all you're doing if you do that is you are wasting your effort. So you really need to make sure that you are super targeted and you know the audience, right? And in some cases, if you serve different industries, then you've got to get a persona for each of those industries. So you figure out what's the core message. And to the participant who shared their thoughts about doing that homework first, that's why that's so important. You do a little bit of homework and you figure out what's going to be the right message based on what you've determined that buyer probably really cares about. The other reason it is so important to spend a little bit of time thinking about your audience type, it will help you determine which social channels are applicable for you. And let me just say that if you hear anyone who calls themselves an expert and they tell you you need all channels, I will tell you to run for the hills. You need the channels where your potential buyer is likely to be, right? It's like fishing where the fish are. So you need to think carefully about your audience and where they're likely to spend time. Here's a great example. A couple of years ago, everybody got all worked up about Pinterest. And Pinterest is a great platform, and I spent time learning the platform and pin boards, and I have all that, right? But do I use it as part of my business strategy? No. I learned the platform and really got to understand what it was all about because that's the business that I'm in. But Pinterest is very specific, right? It's about 90%, 95%, the composition is women. Brands that seem to do very well are going to be more like hospitality and weddings and cooking and, automobiles and those sorts of things. So you need to, and if I'm targeting a VP of sales, he or she is probably not spending their day all day on Pinterest. So it's important that as you think about the audience, you think about the channels where you're likely to reach in. Next, make sure that there are social media guidelines in place. Every organization pretty much has some communication policy in place already about what it's appropriate to say and do over email or whatever it might be. You need to think about that in terms of social media as well. So people know what to expect and they have some guidance about what's appropriate to say and do on behalf of the organization. You also need to think about how are you going to capture leads, right, from non-traditional sources. And so it's one thing to say, okay, let's get all our salespeople on Twitter. Fine, but what are you going to do when leads come through Twitter? How is that going to be merged into your marketing nurturing system and the CRM system? So you got to think about all these things. And then finally, of course, what are you going to monitor? Right? What are you going to measure and track so that you can make sure that the places and the activities you're choosing to spend time on are really going to drive that return for you? And keeping score is critical, and there's lots of things that you can focus on in terms of scoring, like influence scores, and if you're on Twitter, how many times somebody retweeted or how many times your status updates are viewed and liked. I pay attention to the posts I publish on my LinkedIn profile. I pay attention to the statistics to determine what kind of content the people in my network and the people who are following me really seem to like. From a sales point of view, it can also be those, and should be, those expanded connections with your targeted buyers or number of net new meetings. It might be, how many of these conversations that started on LinkedIn, as an example, led to a sales conversation either on the phone or in person. So you really do have to think about what you're going to track. And for a lot of organizations, that will flex, right? It'll be a little bit different based on your goals and objectives, but keeping score is really important.
Barb, we're getting some more questions about those metrics, and they're all kind of coalescing around the theme of what should somebody's company track versus individual salespeople track? What's the best way to kind of balance that? And then if you were going to pick a couple of metrics that are really the most important in a B2B setting, what would you recommend?
All right, good. So good question. So if I'm thinking about strictly I'm the seller, right? I'm the salesperson, or even I'm the sales leader who's helping to put the plan together. I'm going to be thinking about, and most of my customers do, they're looking for their salespeople to expand their networks with larger numbers of the right targeted connections. So, and this is an important point. It's not the numbers that count, it's the quality of the numbers that count. And in the book, I talked a lot about quality versus quantity, and I still do to this day. You need a mix of both, but what you're looking for is, I would measure the quality of that network. So if your targeted buyer is a VP of sales and a chief marketing officer, how well are your sales reps actually doing expanding those networks to connect and reach those people? Certainly also on a sales point of view, if I'm a sales manager, I'm going to care about, does that activity that you're doing both online and offline, and I'll tell you what I mean by that in just a minute, how does that translate into net new meetings? The reason I mentioned offline is I find it really interesting that I am sometimes challenged with respect to, well, gosh, spending time on social media, is that really going to drive, new sales meetings and new sales activity? And the answer is yes, when done well. But I do find it fascinating that often that same question isn't asked about offline activities. So I know people run around to a lot of meetings. How is that tracked, right, to determine effectiveness? So I think net new sales meetings. I think on behalf, and I would say influence score. How well are you doing influencing your network is a good one to take a look at. On behalf of the company, let me think about that. So on behalf of the company, it's going to be things like expansion of the network, the community. I'd be looking at follower engagement and, conversations and how many times, content that you are putting out there is being reshared. So those are just a few of my thoughts. But Tracy, you're involved in this too. You may have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I definitely do. And your point about running for the hills is very well taken, because we do have, lots of ideas coming in from a bunch of our employees about, hey, we should be on Pinterest, or hey, we should be on Facebook. And if we were a consumer brand company, I would say, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. But what we focus on here in a B2B setting are Twitter and LinkedIn primarily, as well as our super healthy blog. We also have, and now's a good time to bring it up, a content website called Social Selling University. socialsellingu.com. That's mostly third-party and InsideView authored content, not commercials about products. It's all about tactics and strategies like what you're talking about here. In terms of measurement, we're looking at engagement metrics. So, not how many times are we broadcasting, but we're looking at how many times are people interacting with us, and then who are they. So, for instance, we're following our top 250 accounts on Twitter and people in those accounts, and our salespeople that are running those big accounts are interacting with those prospects and customers in a very targeted way. So marketing helps facilitate that as one good example.
Absolutely, and actually that's a great point, because you know what, as a salesperson, I do that too. So a lot of people don't see value. Sometimes sellers don't see value in Twitter, and I won't go into too much detail here, but one of the most valuable things is that Twitter provides an easier way for you to casually start to get involved in conversations with people you want to do business with. So I do that too. I have a stream of my prospects that I'm following, and I'm paying attention to the things that they're sharing. So all good stuff. All right, so let's talk about designing that program. What does that really look like? Well, it's really focused on making sure, first of all, if you're a sales leader and you're thinking about a program for your team, it's really making sure that your folks have the relevant skills and that they really do consider current buyer behavior and expectations. On that note, let me just say that today, a salesperson's ability to demonstrate to a buyer that they can help solve problems is going to be a competitive advantage for you. Harvard Business Review, in their a white paper they put out last year about buyers being empowered in a digital world, buyers are saying that 72% of those buyers have said that a salesperson's ability to help them solve their business objectives is what leads them. It's a big factor in their decision-making process. So you do need to consider current buyer behavior and expectations. Second thing in terms of a program is the strategic use of the technology and those social networks to support the sales process. Now, again, I just want to say that even if you're an individual seller and your company hasn't totally gone down the path of designing a program for you, these suggestions and strategies work for you too. Make sure you're getting the skills that you need. Make sure you're thinking about how you change up how you approach the selling process, and make sure that you learn strategies that are going to help you be successful with the integration of social into your selling. I've talked a little bit about sales and sales enablement and marketing. But again, sales leaders need to set the example and drive the execution and accountability. Enablement and the sales ops teams are usually helping to support that adoption plan and provide that environment for ongoing learning. And of course, marketing is helping to create systems and developing content that can be easily shared by sellers. I would also say is that I'm seeing a trend, especially in larger organizations, where they also then have internal support with social ambassadors. So these would be salespeople in your organization who just love social, who've got in, who do it really well, and they're very strategic, and they help to provide that ongoing support to their peers. So here's the thing. If you don't have the alignment, what ends up happening is that your sellers don't adopt new behaviors, right? We're human beings. That's what's going to happen. They'll just fall back into old habits. There ends up being no accountability for consistent execution, or the sales force isn't providing enough educational content or the tools that they really need, or the guidance and the training they really need to help them create those new sales opportunities, which is the whole point of engaging in this to begin with. So really important that you have that alignment. When you're thinking about the program, and when you're thinking about designing a learning and development program, and this includes whether you bring in another organization to help work with you to do that, you want to make sure that you're thinking about that learning and development being focused on the buyer and what's important to them. Most sales training up to this point has really focused on, hey, why us, why our solution? Let me tell you how great we are, and how long we've been in business, and why you should buy from us. And that has really flipped. So thinking and realizing and accepting that the buying journey is going on, again, early stage research, buyers and their teams are doing early stage research to vet short lists of product solutions, companies, and people that they want to work with. So think about how you can create that value through education. It might be things like sharing industry articles or trends, things that help them start to challenge their status quo thinking. But in the end, it's about how you demonstrate how your solution solves problems. And feature dumps don't do it, right? So one of the ways you can do it is you add value with insights. Now, I am a longtime fan of InsideView. I've been a user since 2009. I use it part of my day, every day, all day. Now, it's not a big pitch, right, for the products, but I'm giving you my personal opinion because I use it, and I think more sellers need to check it out. And certainly, if you have an interest on the marketing side, you can talk to Tracy and the team. But this is how I get business insights, because this information is gleaned from public sources and social channels. So I'm getting the public data that helps me be much more informed about what's important to an organization. This, to the participants' earlier point, is how I start to make some determinations and start to understand what key initiatives might be happening in the organization. I pay attention to triggers like leadership changes or mergers and acquisitions, or anything that would signify signal to me an opportunity to reach out to that person that I want to do business with. So highly recommend, because it allows me to go deep dive on both people and companies. Now, in case someone decides to ask me, I also use LinkedIn very religiously because it is a big business platform. Everybody's there. But let me draw the distinction. LinkedIn, the information in the profile can be very, very helpful, but always keep in mind, users generate that information and they put on their profile or on their company page what they want you to know, versus you being able to source information across the web that really, really helps you. So think about when you're designing that learning and development program, when you're going through your daily sales day, gather intelligence that's going to help demonstrate to a buyer that you are informed and the one to work with. And then let's talk about training as a process. Here's the deal. 90% of that learning is gone if there's no ongoing reinforcement. And it's less than 30 days, it's gone. Think about this for yourself. How many times have you sat through a training and it's all good stuff, and oh my gosh, yes, when you get back to the office, you are going to put that into practice. You promise yourself you're going to change, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So it's very important that you think about it as a process. It could be instructor-led with homework and learning libraries, coaching calls, collaboration tools, but really important to think about how you keep the learning going.
Barb, there's a bunch of questions here about training, and they're falling into two camps. Some of them are regarding real basic starter things like, how do I learn how to use Twitter? Like, are there some dummies books or things you recommend? And then the second one is, who should own training in a company? Do you see it typically brought in by marketing or sales enablement or a sales leader? Who are folks on the line are kind of wondering, who do they go bang on in their companies to get something started?
Okay, great. Both of them are very good questions. To the first question, how do you as an individual learn these tools? Well, a couple good ways. Do like I do. First of all, get yourself signed up and start, checking out what there is to offer, right? There are great books out there. I have a number of resources. If you need a little bit of help learning more about how to learn more about LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever it might be, reach out to me. I'm happy to share some resources with you that I think are very good that I used in my early days when I was learning a lot of these things. But one of the best ways really is to get in there and start doing it, and then follow other people that you want to learn from. That's another thing that I did, is I started following the early social media influencers and really learning from the things that they were doing. Now, who owns the training plan? Well, that's a great question, and there's probably going to be a number of answers depending on the organization. You could say it's owned by, the operations team, who's often responsible for sales training. Personally, I think the plan is jointly owned by sales and marketing leaders. That's my opinion on it. I don't know if you have a different thought on that or not, Tracy, but I really do think that sometimes it can be too easy if it falls into the training role. With all due respect, sometimes it just becomes, okay, let's just do a few trainings and click it off the list. I really think that this has to come from a place of strategy that is developed and aligned between the sales and marketing organization.
In a perfect world, Barb, what I have seen, and I've been a B2B technology marketer for longer than I care to remember. In the best world, the marketer, the marketing leader, and the sales leader or leaders are first of all agree that this is something that they want to do, and then ideally, marketing is driving the company's social efforts, and then providing content to sales that they can use to engage with. And in a super perfect world, there might even be like a quarterly theme around a specific topic. Like for us, social selling happens to be a really hot theme this quarter. So this webinar isn't the only thing that we're doing, right? There's a lot of other ways that we're engaging both from a corporate level and an individual level. In another particular quarter, we might have a topic around, sales and marketing alignment or something else. So I encourage folks to think about what their audience cares about and then partner with the marketing and sales organizations to figure out what kind of theme they can rally around. And I really think it's marketing's responsibility to provide interesting content, that 80-20. A big part of that 80% can very much be provided or directed by the marketing team. Not all of it, because I think as individuals, you need to find interesting things that you want to share yourself. But those would be some of my recommendations.
Excellent. And those are good ones. And so we're going to strive for the perfect world, Tracy, because that's what I want to see happening as well. I don't think any one group owns it specifically on their own. I think the team, comes together around that. So I think that's great. Well, let me wrap with just a couple of things related to, a recent customer story, just to give you an example of what a program can look like. And, in their case, their goal was really to provide both sales and marketing with necessary tools and training to help them engage with and influence potential buyers on social media. That was the overarching goal. And so we worked together to plan how this was going to all come together, where sales and marketing leaders were all there. We assessed those sales and social media skills. I interviewed a lot of people in the organization, sellers and the marketers and the leaders, and then we really came together and customized the content. In this particular case, the customer was using many of the strategies related to challenger sales methodology. So I wanted to make sure that we incorporated that as part of the story to help reinforce. Because here's the thing, you can be the best of the best using social media, and you get those sales conversations going, and you get on the phone and you get those meetings. The most critical part of closing business is what happens at that moment once you get those meetings. And so this isn't just using social as part of your sales process. You've got to have great selling skills as well. As you can see, the tools were LinkedIn, InsideView, Twitter, and Hootsuite, and it was a combination of instructor-led virtual sessions that were recorded with small group coaching for 6 months. Just coming back, it was small groups, 1 hour every month, and then focused time with the management team. So highly recommend that you really think about that mix as we talked about, and then you can have social ambassadors in your group who are also helping to keep their sales peers up to date on what good content is available and would be helpful for them in sort of connecting with their buyers. So really, what I'd want to say is, start with the why social and make sure you get everybody on board, and start with here's how we're going to get started. Make sure your leadership is involved and you identify those sales champions. And certainly in the beginning, you may want to consider, and I'm not saying this to be self-serving, you may not have the talent to help you do it in-house. So do consider that you might initially need someone external to assist you. And what I found from experience is that delivering that training in manageable chunks over a period of time, followed up with coaching, is how you really start to get the change you want to see in the organization and in the sales behavior. And then finally, think about how you can incent people to make sure that they really do start adopting the new behaviors and build in those incentives to get them started. So, we can spend hours talking about this, and I know our time is short, so and we want to take some more questions. So just final things, really, just support everything that we've already talked about. This is the way of the world, so people really need to look at how do they shift their own sales behavior, and as sales leaders and marketing leaders, you want to make sure that you adopt a program and put a program in place that helps your sellers adapt to this new reality that we are living in, because you know what? It's just not going to change, and it's really important that we adapt our approach, or we're going to find that our sales effectiveness just gets less effective every day. So there you have it, Tracy. That's what I've got. Do we have more questions coming in from the group?
We have loads of more questions, Barb. And before we get to that, I want to offer to folks, please check out the InsideView blog, the Social Selling University that we offer. And also, if you're interested in seeing what our tools can do, I got to do the obligatory 15-second commercial. We have a really great custom demo program as well as a free trial, and you can find out about that on the InsideView website. So here are some more questions, and I'm trying to consolidate, Barb, because there's more than 50 that have come in. We will be, yeah, I know.
It sounds like some blogs for us.
Seriously, I know. We're going to basically be doing a blog series for sure. But some of the key ones. So there's a bunch of questions all around cold prospects. So, and some of the questions go like this. What if no one knows who you are? You're not getting inbound searches. Another example of something in that theme is how do you warm up cold prospects? So could you comment on that?
Sure. So let me take the first one. No one knows who you are. That's okay. This isn't an easy button here. So once you get started in social channels, you find ways to make yourself known. Things like doing a webinar with a partner company or one of your customers, or pull together, a panel, right? A webinar panel with some thought leaders in your industry and start inviting people to attend. In your local communities, host and facilitate a network event that's really about helping buyers connect with each other, right? Because often, so help facilitate that peer-to-peer networking. My gosh, I can think of all kinds of ways for you to get yourself known. Start writing articles. If you like talking to other people like I do, I started on radio way back when, and I went to podcasting because I just love interviewing people. And Tracy was somebody I talked with about her thoughts related to where we're at with marketing today. It was great. That's another way people can get to know you. My list could go on and on.
There are.
All right, and then the second one. The second one? So, what was the second question? Now I've forgotten.
Yeah, it was basically how do you warm up cold prospects? It's kind of related to what you already answered, I think.
Yeah. I think it is. How you warm it up is you just look for other unique opportunities to be of service to them. And once you do that, then all of a sudden they're going to start to see you as somebody who adds value and is helpful and is doing something for them versus trying to sell them something.
So here's another question, which we haven't covered at all, which I think is a really big one. What is the interplay between a customer support organization and social selling? For instance, how do you handle customer complaints that might come in or things of that nature?
Yes, it's a very good question. And actually, in my perfect world, as we keep moving forward, when you're designing a social selling program, or I should just say a social business initiative for an organization, service needs to be part of that as well. I think it's really important to internally define who is responsible for that. So even if I'm a sales rep who's interacting with people on Twitter, there needs to be a process that I know how to follow if a complaint comes in to me. Right, and so that's even that's probably another series for you, Tracy, about how you really put a customer experience program together. So like everything else, you need to think that through. And if that complaint comes in, who's going to respond, how fast are you going to respond, are you going to take it over to a direct message, you're going to do it on email, you're going to call them. But whatever you do, it would be important for you to realize, just like even if somebody called me up on the phone with a complaint, the worst thing you could do would be to try to justify or argue with anyone. So I think the most important thing I want people listening in, Tracy, to think about is really talk that through and make sure that you have a clear plan on how that should be handled, and then make sure that's clearly communicated to any of your employees who are acting as advocates for your organization online.
I couldn't agree more. As we all get worried about control over social media and making sure that our employees don't say the wrong things, don't disclose things they shouldn't disclose. I can remember, several years ago, I had an employee that talked about a product way before it was launched, so you have to really be ready, not only with your training but also with your monitoring. We've all seen examples of companies, especially in the consumer world, that have fabulous customer support on social media. Virgin America would be a great example of that, where you hear stories about people's flights being canceled and tweeting out a complaint, and then one of their customer service reps jumping in. And I think there's a lot we can learn in the business world from how the consumer world handles those kinds of interactions, and things to watch there.
I think you're right, because Zappos is another one who does great. And I know from personal experience, that I had a complaint about something. They took it with me offline quickly, and they resolved it. Now, the interesting thing about the story, which I won't get into the story because we don't have enough time, is that ultimately I realized I was probably the one who made the mistake, right, with the order, thinking that I had set it to ship overnight. That didn't matter to them, right? They just said, hey, we fixed it. You'll have it tomorrow morning. And then to add to that, Tracy, I would say the planning is so important, because the worst thing you can do is to pretend that you're going to be online to support people, and then you don't. And I could give you hundreds of examples of organizations who say, tweet us if you have a problem, and then you hear crickets.
Yeah, you do have to be behind it. And I think as marketers, we really need to look at the composition of our team and our resources when it comes to corporate interactions and prioritize it. And that may mean you have to stop doing some of your more traditional programs, but I think it's something that you got to figure out a way to handle. Barb, another question related, there's lots of questions around the theme of, hey, I'm on board, I want to get started, but how do I convince my sales team or my company that we should have a social selling program? Are there any stats or reports that I could use to convince them?
There absolutely are, and I'll just give a shameless plug. Please contact me. I would love to help you solve that problem.
Very good. I think that crawl, walk, run kind of recommendation is something that folks on the line are really hungry for.
Yes.
Couple more questions before we wrap, Barb. One of them is, how do you figure out, can you be a little more specific on where to find your prospects in the social world? How can you figure out where they go for information so that you can start interacting with them in that forum?
All right, so I'll give one of the easiest ways for you to get started is, let's assume they have and most do, but you will occasionally find people who don't. So you could start on LinkedIn. You could look at their profile, and do they have a Twitter account? You can see what groups that they follow. You can see what companies they follow, what influencers they follow. If you're using InsideView, you could use InsideView to determine, what channels, what other social channels they might be participating in. So just, find their profile on LinkedIn is one of the easiest ways to get started. You can certainly search their name on Twitter, but if they have a Twitter account, they've hooked it to LinkedIn, you'll find it there. So that's an easy way to get yourself started figuring out where they might go. That's what I did in the very beginning.
I have a very practical suggestion there as well. So say you find
Sure.
Susie Smith on LinkedIn from Acme Company, and Acme is a target account for you. You figure out where Susie, what groups she's in. You mentioned that, but then go join those groups yourself and just
Absolutely.
listen for a while. Don't broadcast a bunch of stuff yet. Just listen for a while and see what the conversations are like. And then our best social selling sales reps here at InsideView are basically being helpful on those forums by posting useful content, offering to help people in a variety of ways. And very, very seldom do they push our products or offer anything of any sort that's related to the actual selling of our solution. They wait to be asked, but very often, because they're being helpful, they will get invited to talk further about what we offer. But it all starts with being helpful and altruistic after listening to what's going on in a particular forum or group.
You bet. And you know what? In the early days, before these things started getting really sophisticated, Tracy, one of the things that I did is I just set up Google alerts on certain people and certain companies, and that way if anything popped up related to them, but again, I don't need to do that because I have a better business intelligence tool that helps me keep track.
Very good. We have time for one last question, and it's related to marketing versus selling. Can you explain the difference between social marketing and social selling?
So I'll give my definition, and then you're the expert on the marketing side, Tracy. So you'll have a thought too. The way I view it is marketing's role is really building education and engagement and community on behalf of the brand in total, the company in total. On the sales side of it, our job is to develop those interpersonal relationships with the actual individuals that we are going to want to talk to, who are going to be the ones who would actually say yes to a sale. So, I mean, the two go together, and it's a good question because often some people will think that, well, gosh, social media is being handled by my marketing team, so my salespeople don't need to get involved.
Right.
Well, that's not true. They absolutely do need to get involved.
I would add one little nuance to what you said, which is kind of what the more targeted folks are doing. There's a lot of buzz in the industry right now about account-based marketing, and when I think about that, it's very simple. You take your top accounts that you as a sales rep or a company are going after, and then marketing should really help facilitate listening to those accounts, following those accounts, and then the very best salespeople are watching the business pain in those accounts and then working with their marketing team to figure out what kind of interesting content or education would be useful to those businesses. And sometimes it might be industry specific or it might be specific to a role. But that's a really great way to get started small. Otherwise, it can feel very daunting, like you have to boil the ocean with a big, huge program. So I would recommend people think about very account specific things to try to get started.
Absolutely. I think that's great suggestion.
So we're at the top of the hour, Barb. I want to thank you so much for your time and effort that you put into all your materials. We will be following up with everybody who registered with the recording and the slides, and that'll be by the end of the week. We'll also be blogging on a number of the topics that came through today. There's more than 60 questions now, and we covered a lot, but there's still more to do. So appreciate everyone's time on the line today and how interactive everyone was. This was a really fantastic and fun experience. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much.